What have you learned while building the business?
So we again started trying to do technology development without really knowing what or who was going to buy it, and then pretty quickly had to rein that in and just work out exactly who was going to buy it and how much they would pay. And then that's if you can't explain that, then you may as well not bother. That's the first thing you should be doing. The fundamentals. How are you going to make money? Who's your customers going to be? If you're not starting with that, you're going to have problems.
On the journey of sort of building the business, what was the biggest problem that you guys faced?
There's been a few. The first bearing arrangement on the first prototype didn't work. That was a whole machine redesign on a very limited budget. That was quite bad. Big cash flow problem at one point. We were expecting an R&D grant back from R&D tax credit back from HMRC, which didn't come for months when we were expecting it to. That quite kind of created a 2 month hole in our budget when we didn't have much budget, which was a real issue. Just getting funding was another. If no one's interested in the thing and developing it that you're trying to develop, you're going nowhere. It's a unless you're capable of self-funding it. And there was 10 companies over a day, and then you're having a chat with people afterwards. And we were the only one that wasn't AI related doing a pitch, that we're actually doing a physical product. It's, from an investor's point of view, you can see why a lot of that's appealing, because you can build a fully working thing without having to buy any infrastructure, or without having to do tooling, or without building a factory. You can get a product to market which might be really successful. But it's not what we do, though. So it's a bit of a watching 90% of everyone's attention go elsewhere is kind of a difficult thing to. You've just got to, as long as you're doing something that's going to be valuable, you've got to trust yourself that you've got that right, and just carry on anyway. I think that's the.
For everyone who never heard about your company, never heard about you, can you tell us a little bit about what you are building, what's your company?
That's kind of gone off in a load of different directions. And originally, and you can tell by the company name, so originally we were intending to come up with a new concept, develop the design to prove it works, and then license it to companies, to big companies, and then sort of move on to the next project and do that early sort of product development cycle. It started out a little bit complicated, kind of whittled it down to simplifying revolutionary concepts to a company that's going to develop air compressors. Essentially, that's where we've got to.
Where the idea came from? Why did you started this company?
It's a bit of an interesting question, because I can either say we've specifically gone out and developed this, which is quite a short answer, and it's a really efficient machine. But that's not really how the company started. It started trying to do all sorts of different things, and we've slowly worked out over time, mostly by trial and error, that that's not actually how anyone develops a company. And
How long did it take you to actually go from trying different ideas and being like, okay, I'm gonna go with this?
so the design loop's probably only taken us about 3 months. It's the product development. Once we got organized and knew what everything was, and it's taken about 3 months. So we only really kicked that off in April in anger. But in the background, it's taken kind of 2 years to get us to that position that we actually know what was going on.
So let's maybe follow that and talk about that funding that you mentioned. So how much funding have you managed to raise, and how the journey looked like for you?
I think what are we up to now? £270,000 in total. So that first initial funding round actually came through an Innovate UK event. So we're based up in Kendal. Went down to do a pitch at renewable energy Innovate UK event in Birmingham, and got lucky that our investors had come up from Oxford. So we've ended up sort of scattered across the country from where everyone's based, which is a little bit awkward. But to be honest, it's quite a good match, because I think that they're technology development focused company. They've been doing it for 40 years. They really know what they're doing. I think after a lot of detailed questioning, they kind of got where we were coming from. But they're one of very, like, I think, having tried to do funding again since then, you realise how lucky we got first time, in that they move very quickly. They make decisions internally very quickly. And that's quite rare in the investment world in the UK.
If you can share a little bit how the valuation was sort of created, or like how the company valued on the first investment, second, and I think you said there were three.
Yeah, the first and second ones were two back to back pretty quickly. So the company, I think the first company valuation was way below what we'd have liked, but it worked for everyone at the time, so we sort of went with it. It's kind of 10% of the company, something of that order.
And it was proposed by the investors, right? And you were like, okay.
It's one of them, almost like a out of the movie's version of a negotiation where it's like, well, I think 10, you think 20, let's go with 15. Yeah, okay. And it was that quick. It was like, can we make that work? Yes, okay, right, let's just get.
Well, at least you guys didn't waste that much time on that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we'd taken what 3 months the first time, but we've seen a lot of people take a lot longer than that. I mean, there's people we were talking to when I was starting the company. Then they're still looking for funding 2 years down the line.
Yeah, 100%.
So I keep saying we got lucky with it, but we were pretty organised and we had a route to getting patents granted that we sort of it was really immature pre-seed funding, like very early, almost angel investment type of territory. So the first two investments were very early on and quite sort of expensive for us as founders. There was more than a year between that stage and when we still got to actually having a second investment round, which is what we're using at the moment to kind of stabilize everything. And
Building the business from the ground up, it is a war zone. Like even if you're experienced in a certain field, like
it does feel like being in a big fight over everything. And at the same time, you've got to keep HMRC happy and you've got to develop all the business processes that you're going to use going forwards. And you're going to manage all of your risks, and then you've got to keep all your investors informed of what's going on. It's this, so you always got this is why at the start I was saying I'm still tired and kind of making progress. It's, as long as my to-do list is getting shorter, plus it is making progress every week.
So how did you guys decide how much funding you need?
Basically, outline bill of materials and literally a detailed line by line. The impeller's going to cost this much, the motor's going to cost this much, our time's going to cost this much, and add it all up, and that's how much money you need. Maybe a little bit of contingency as well, but so that the minimum bar is kind of set by that.
Did you have to provide like a financial models to investors?
Yeah. Working out what needs to go in a financial model and how they all work. That was all very early on, and then having it so that you can explain it is another sort of, so we've ended up almost with two financial models. One's the proper one we actually use to run the business, and one's a summary one that kind of rolls it up into a understandable, explainable format that takes sort of 10 minutes instead of 5 hours to go through. So it all needs to tie up, and you're constantly trying to, every time you update your business plan, you have to update your spending plan and make sure everything's like, in engineering, it's sort of revision control is what we call it, and we just use the same kind of process on making sure you've got all a baseline that's constantly maintained. Is it?
Like, did you guys build a financial model by yourself, or did you hire an external?
We had a consultant do that for us. Actually, it's one of the things we spent some of our very like the money we put in ourselves, probably about 15-20% of it went on a really good guy, Paul. Is just an element that I think from my previous job, if it's faster to pay someone to do a really good job of it, most of the time it's worth doing. As long as you can afford it, it's all the balancing act of affordability versus speed. But at the time, that was a big problem for us, trying to understand what investors actually wanted to see. And
so how many investors have you contacted?
Probably about 60, something of that order. Trying to whittle it down to people that do the right one is the reason that's like you could send the pitch deck to 200 investors, but if they only do Series B onwards, and if they don't do early stages, for us that's pointless. So there's probably about 10 of them that might take us seriously, something like that, and the other ones were kind of speculative, and we'll see if we get lucky with it, which you have to try a bit. Yeah, we've probably had about 10 conversations with people where we've actually done a pitch, and
that's still good. Out of 60 to have 10, that's pretty decent.
As long as you explain our business correctly, either the heat pump or the compressors, they're both good, solid business models in the background. And as long as you do a good job of explaining that in a pitch deck and manage to get it across, yeah. And as long as you're willing to go to an event that's 2 hours drive away just to do a 5-minute pitch, it's you can get in front of people if you get the basics right and the fundamental business is okay. I think part of our issue is the amount of money we're looking for is quite small at the moment. So a lot of the funds won't touch anything under £1 million or £2 million as a Series A or C. It gets a bit blurry at the moment. I think that definition's not particularly clear in the UK. But
I don't think it ever been clear.
No, which is interesting when you try to learn it and understand all the terminology. In the US, seed is like £2 million, and over here it's totally different environment and the same terminology and the same words across the whole industry. So
So was the SCIS helpful in raising funds, or investors weren't really interested in?
Yeah, SAS and EIS are both. We've covered a bit of both now, and that's been basically the route that we've been through.
But was they like has the investors been interested in it, or?
Yeah, that's the only way we've been successful up to this point. SAS and EIS is obviously working to some degree, certainly on the early technology
So in
stage.
those next 3 to 6 months, what's your focus? What's the business focus?
Very next thing that we need to do is work out who we're going to sell it to, how we're going to sell it to them, start cold calling people, start getting introductions, start going to trade shows, potentially take on a proper salesperson that's experienced. There's working out if we need to change the team. It depends how successful we are on the initial little bit.
B2B process is a long process, so it usually takes months to actually go to the customers, sign the agreements,
Yeah,
talk to, sign the, agree on the,
yeah, and
make sure that everything works between both parties, and then,
yeah, and we're kind of just in a world where we know in 3 months' time we're going to be trying to sell things, but we need to talk to people now just to get the introductions and start everything moving. And
If you could sit down with yourself on a day of starting this business, knowing everything you know now,
yeah,
what's the single most important piece of advice you would give yourself?
I'd have gone and tried to talk to customers immediately. That's the biggest the biggest loop that we went through was that first 6 months where we were deciding what to do, and we weren't phoning people up and asking. It's a little bit complicated because you have to know the right person in the company to get to. So there's a little process there that you can bang on the door and ask who the innovation manager is or who the new product development manager is, and finding that name and then phoning them up and asking them things is really important. There's a bunch of stuff we'd avoid. So trying to avoid doing any grant. I mean, the grant applications is one that's a bit weird. We spent a lot of our time has gone on grant applications early on. The grants is it's nice to have. I wouldn't focus in on it though. That's one I would definitely avoid.
Interesting.
I mean, if there's only a 5% chance of success with a grant application and it takes someone a month to put it together, it's just not worth spending the time. It's not worth it.
And it's also the management of the grant after you receive.
Yeah, and it always comes with an overhead that you're not necessarily expecting, and the time is another one. So the not so much the time spent doing it, but the duration of the grant. So you might get a grant and then it doesn't start for 6 weeks or 6 months.
If you could ask anyone in the world to help you with something, what would you ask about?
I think with our current plan, we're kind of nailed down to what we're doing. So it's a bit of the missing bit at the moment is leading into sales probably. So trying to find a CEO of a packaging company or a nitrogen generation company that buys into it, that would be useful.
Well, thank you very much for your time and for all of the answers.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah.
Ridiculous questions, some of the ridiculous questions.